episode of an insightful, disruptive talks conversation with a legend and an expert himself, Mr. Joshy Jose from the American Indian Foundation. Joshy, very, very warm welcome to you from Devi Sansthan.
Thank you for having me.
So before we move on to talking about so many different things and talking about so many important things, first let me give a brief little introduction of what we're going to do today. We're going to discuss about the measures and about various ways to strengthen literacy and achieve excellence. And that's where we bring Joshi into picture, the expert himself, where he talks to us about what AIF is doing, about what's going on around with regards to children and their literacy measures and alternatives and interventions of the organization to do better and better each day. Before we move on, I would just like to give a small introduction of Joshi. Please allow me for the same, sir. He's the Director of Learning and Migration Programs at the American Indian Foundation, and he's driven by a passion for designing expansive and community based education programs. Joshi has worked with multiple organizations like Breakthrough, Hope, Child Fund, International Youth Foundation, the Leprosy Movement, and many more to come. So let's begin by talking about that only, Joshi, and let like give you the mic on that. Would you please like to take our audience through whatever is going on currently around your life, like work wise?
So at present, the LAM program, which is Learning and Migration Program of American India Foundation, looks at building conducive ecosystems and ecosystem in the community as well as uh, in the institutions, which is schools, anganwadis, wherever we work, to look at how when a child a child within a family which is facing migration and displacement, how do we take up learning or how do we prioritize learning within that ecosystem? Because we increasingly seeing a climate-induced displacement and migration is becoming a reality. And as days go by, this will become more and more, something which we need to grapple with. And American India Foundation for the last 19 years been
Right.
addressing the issue of seasonal and distress migration. And within the when we say distress migration, the looking at learning of children as something which we need to be addressed within this community. Yeah. So that's what where I am basically right now. Um, Busy at, and we as an AIF, we have this saying of unless we look at things right in the community, we are not making a dent. So that's the focus.
Right. That's really great. Beyond that, I think let's talk a little bit about your experience with regards to how education has impacted that experience and how working around social work and impact so much has made you reach where you are. So, would you like to take our audience to that once, maybe?
So, my journey started with working with children affected by children and youth affected by leprosy. And that's in
Right.
way back in 1993 when I was part of a leprosy rehabilitation program where we were with the government of Delhi. We were rehabilitating around 800 families in a place called Nandnagari, just in the border of in Delhi Ghaziabad border. Um, at that point of time, we thought we were actually rehabilitating the people affected by leprosy and the families. But very soon we realized it's actually children who face the most of the ostracization from the community itself. And we started working, helping them to mainstream them. It was more of an exercise to mainstream them back into the community. I was trained on life skills very early on. Then life skills become one pathway which we started looking at the whole rehabilitation process. We started looking at sports as a medium to how do you bring in rehabilitation. And then, of course, at that point of time, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan was very much in the movement. And
Right.
so, bringing in elementary schools, elementary education, strengthening foundational learning, become an agenda in itself as part of this rehabilitation program and mainstreaming children back into the community. That's where the journey started. Later on, I started working on anti-trafficking, especially in the Indo Nepal border, Maharashtra, Siddharth Nagar, and the whole eastern border of India, eastern districts in UP, especially, and even in Muzaffarpur and Motihari, which is again the Bihar border with
Yeah.
Nepal. And that's where I discovered the whole the migration and trafficking often goes you know hand in hand sometimes, and it's and unless we address both when it comes to children and children's well-being, unless we address these two right from the source villages and the transit and destination villages, we don't make a headway. So for many years, from starting from 2012 to 2016, um, uh, we addressed. I mean, I was part of programs which was addressing um, uh, children's learning and gender-based discrimination and gender-based violence the children are facing in the source villages. By end
Right.
of 2020, I am moved into working, started moved into a program which was working at the destination. So I started working with the children who ended up in the rest with the red light districts of India. So particularly in Pune, where the rehabilitation of children living in the red light district become uh,
Right.
a kind of focus area at that point of time. And their elementary education, their education, especially foundational learning, helping them to be part of the mainstream, um, become a kind of focus. Coming back to AIF, it's almost like the loop is being closed. It's we are looking at destination and source together now, um, to look at address the learning of children affected by migration and displacement.
That's very insightful to know. I think let's. I want to catch on what you just said about the requirements of basic necessities for children. And I think we do see literacy and foundational learning as one of those requirements, right? Uh, because that's how children build their future, and specifically children who are going through so much of displacement and not belongingness, and as you discussed as well. uh, would like to take this discussion towards that arena where where you see some of the important benefits of foundational learning for these children and how it's being expanded in modern times. So what according to you are these benefits, if you would like to highlight?
So irrespective of whether a child is in a state of movement or a state of affected by migration or displacement, or whether a child who's staying in a vulnerable community,
Right.
um, one of the things we all agree on is the peak cognitive learning for a child um, uh, is in the age group of 0 to 7. So once they so that's the state we need to start addressing. And that's where I firmly believe foundational learning and early childhood education actually makes the biggest dent, the biggest I will say the biggest movement in terms of learning, for a child. I know,
Right.
and that's where the neural connections are happening, and that's where the highest curve of learning is happening, and that's why it's crucial for children from any background, children from whether it's a child is from the migration background or a child, especially I will say a child who's going through trauma and the um, the movement of migration and displacement, that's the time when we have to bring the child wherever possible, whether it's in Anganwadi, whether it's in some places even for migrant children, even Anganwadis are not available, like in destination geographies. When I was working in the red light area, finding an Anganwadi itself was a challenge, and
Right.
we had to finally had to start a daycare center for children of the sex workers. In fact, a daycare center and a night shelter for
Hmm.
them to stay back, and they can continue this the learning curve or learning journey, which they can. So, by the age 7, if we don't bring in enough um, cognitive pathways for them to learn, um, it becomes difficult for them to move into, especially language skills. Uh, you know, you can still look at logic, but language skills, the easiest is for them to, be part of the learning curve before the age 7.
Right. I think that's also very important given the cognitive development as well, right?
Yeah,
Moving on from this discussion to, like, no, because I'm personally very curious and also very looking forward to knowing about American India Foundation and what it is doing to uh, bridge the societal gap there. Would you like to take us through some of your recent interventions where AIF is working towards a goal?
yeah. So AIF, if you the way AIF looks at this whole uh, the learning spectrum is through three or four vital nodes, which I will say. We at the early childhood education is the earliest node which we start intervening. It has two advantages. One is you are bringing prioritization of education within the affected community, right? So that's one node which we are looking at. So, and because it is also to do with early childhood education, is also to do with more fine motor skills and cognitive, and, and so the nutrition component at that time, it's pretty important. So we at that level in many of our programs, the it works through an integrated. So we work at the Anganwadi addressing nutrition as well as learning together, so that it brings in a holistic learning curve for the child. So that's the earliest node. The
Right.
second one, which we in this pathway, is we look at foundational learning as the child enters class 1. So school readiness program, school readiness is what we address in the early childhood education program. But at the moment the child enters class 1, and that's where for us the foundational learning start. Of course, foundational learning is also part of ECE, which is in the Anganwadi, but 1 and 2. So from zero, from 3 years to the the 7 years is what we are looking at going forward as a placeholder for foundational learning. And then from there you move into something for us, for because we are, if I'm working with affected community, remediation is a mm, big part for us, by because often where we are saying by class grade 3 children need remediation, and not all the children especially affected by mm, migration and displacement, they miss out sometimes 4 months 5 months classes. Sometimes because the head of the household has gone migrated or gone out for searching for livelihood options, or the family migrates sometimes because of food security issues of food security. Children may miss out for 2 or 3 or 4 months, and to bring them back, uh, a bridge program, which is essentially a remediation program, is very much is where is needed. In, so that's the third part of the curve. And the fourth one is where we look at what we call internally is a learning continuation program, where we're saying that the child may come back to the mainstream, but the child is still fragile in a situation. The situation of the child is still fragile. Anytime the child can drop out of the mainstream. So unless we help the child to understand the concept in a demystified way, in a very simplified way, the child don't find it interesting to continue to be part of the experiences. So that's the learning continuation program. This essentially again is a simplified, demystified way of helping the child to understand the concepts. That's we
Right.
normally
Also,
teach them at tech, uh, and then from there, um, uh, because essentially the whole journey started with issue about livelihoods, which is what essentially the root cause of migration. So we look at skilling as a which is part of our livelihood program.
that's very nice to know that there is a remedial solution towards it, because I think the remedy essentially, or what we call as interventions for remedy, become very important, specifically for children who go through trauma, as you said, right?
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
because these children are not really having a safer net around them to process that trauma or to deal with that trauma. And I think that's where the role of literacy or the role of foundational learning also comes into picture, because they then get a knowledge of the world outside them, and then they get to access the world through that foundational learning. Coming to a bit of your personal experiences and how life has been so far over the decades of this work experience that you've had, and I don't want to go again with the audience, because all of us know how experienced you are and how much you bring to the table, because it's very insightful that way. So, any personal takeaways or any major takeaways from your experience while you were dealing or while you were intervening in systems like FLN or STEM or even community based implementation? What were your major takeaways from there, Joshi?
So, over the years, one of the things which one of the an insight which still drives me is this question about whether we are only intervening at the educational technology part of it, or are you building the ecosystem?
Right.
So my experience is unless you build an ecosystem, as the famous Einstein, the quote from Einstein, I don't teach my pupil, but then I create an environment where they learn. That's what Einstein says, right? So creating this environment, the right environment at the community, it's a big part of helping the child to go on a learning journey. Uh, Say, for example, a family which is facing, say, migration. The family may have had a crop failure, is affected by flood or a drought,
Hmm.
or there is affected by a natural disaster, a cyclone or a flood. For that family, the highest priority is food security. The next priority probably search for livelihoods. you know Education of the children may not seems to be a priority for the family which is facing disaster.
Right.
But if it is happening, say year after year, say, when I was in Assam, we have several programs in Assam. We have programs in Nandurbar, which is one of the places where a lot of landslides happening, natural, disasters kind of unfolds, uh, um, and several other places. The family, for them to the family face this year on year. It is never one isolated event, right? So one of the things which we are discussing, and we have created a lot of plans. So how do we create, shift distance migration into planned migration. Migration is happening. I'm a migrant. I'm originally from Kerala, and I am working in Delhi, right? So, and I stayed in different parts of the country. So it's a so in that way, the, the reason why I don't face crisis is because often it is planned, right? Most of the time is planned. And so this the shift from distress migration to planned migration is something which really will help children to have a learning journey. So how do you prioritize? One of the things which when we talk about ecosystem building within a community and ecosystem building within a school, these are two ecosystems we talk about.
Right.
The ecosystem is basically is about how do you prioritize education in a community and what all components you need to help the community to prioritize education, especially a community which is affected by displacement and migration. I'm talking about source villages as well as destination villages.
Right.
Recently I was in another event, one of our LAMP events, and the discussion unfolded is about the Anganwadi system. Sometimes in the destination centers may not be apt for migrant families, because migrant families, they are there for work and they have to be at the work sites by 7 o'clock, from 7 o'clock to say 7 o'clock in the evening, 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. Where do they drop their children when they go to work sites? Because the Anganwadis, most of the Anganwadis open up at 8 o'clock and they close down by 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock max. So there is this component of ecosystem building in the community which we need to really be looking at if we want to prioritize education. I'll come in a little while the Vietnam story, which we did
Yes.
then. And we also need to look at ecosystem in the school. Uh, you know, are the schools welcoming children who are either from a migration background, who face migration, or from a displacement background where they faced climate induced displacement. In a destination center, the biggest issue the children face is the language, and the culture. Often the cultures don't accept children from other geographies or other states, or they find themselves as a kind of unwanted. So, how do we look at this whole scenario holistically? Is what will help the learning curve for this last mile to unfold. So, am I audible?
Yes, please continue.
No, so that's what I was saying. So that's where the ecosystem building is one big factor. The other one is agency building. Agency building, all stakeholders who are part of this continuum. So you can build ecosystem of bringing awareness, helping people to prioritize education in both community and the institution, which is schools or Anganwadi. But the other big one is about agency building. So does an Anganwadi teacher have enough agency to take care of the needs of children who are on in terms of educational needs of children and early childhood education? Are they acute? Is the panchayat president or the PRI member is she or he aware of the multiple schemes which his government is unfolding for helping them? Is the SMC member aware of how to create a school development plan, say for example? So agency and all the teachers, the most of the teachers now, the good thing happened was is about helping the government is investing a lot actually in building the capacity of the teachers. So That's amazing. In the last 5 years, the kind of emphasis on teachers' capacity building is amazing. So, agency building of the teachers being built, but then the agency of other stakeholders in the same institution one is something which we need to look at.
Right, and that's important because I think as you also were mentioning that these children or specifically stakeholders from such varied backgrounds, and not just varied, maybe some chaotic backgrounds as well, they do need that sort of remedial solution. They do need that sort of intervention where they're not, because I remember while you were talking about leaving their kids behind and going to do various labors. I do understand that context as well because I've seen such kids in front of me around us, where some laborers or some migrant laborers are coming in. So very important for them as well to, I think, gain education, to gain that sort of a sense of or that awareness, because that is important, right? Don't you think that such children who process this or who come from these backgrounds, which are essential, which need more care, which need more sort of intervention, uh, what sort of awareness lessons or what sort of awareness points you could give to the parents of such children so that another generation doesn't fall in the same trap?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question we are grappling with within. We did have a headway on this. So if you look at I mean, this, how do you break out of the vicious cycle of intergenerational or multidimensional poverty, right?
Right,
It's That's something which the only way out is one of the way out is the next generation need to be equipped to break out of it. They should not be part of the intergenerational poverty cycle which the
correct,
parents are part of, right?
correct,
Now, how do you make the parents understand this? That's where the behavior change or the social norm based change programs need to kick in. It educates. So the community behavior change. It is where the prioritization of education within a community will come through. It is not simply by helping the parents to be aware, and even if they are aware, they still will not make a decision which is a positive decision for the child to continue education unless they have support from the community. So, for
right.
example, often a child was left behind, in the village with the caregiver as a relative, with a nana, nani, with an uncle or auntie. When the child is left behind, as a family migrates for livelihood or for security, uh, so internally, AIF is investing a lot to look at how do we give support to this caregiver who is supporting the child to continue education. We have case studies, different case studies, and different incidences we witness about how the head of the household, the father, migrates for livelihood purposes, and the mother, she cannot stay in the same house alone with children, so she moves
Hmm.
back to her in-laws house.
Hmm.
And then the prioritized education sometimes is not the same, or maybe the schools are not available in that village.
Right.
So the whole equation changes. So how do you support the caregiver is a big part of helping the child to continue within the school premise
Right.
or within the learning curve.
Right. That support is also necessary so that because they haven't had this generational understanding, they get to they get to better understand it. Now,
So for a long time, AI used to support something called a seasonal hostels,
okay.
um, uh, and now we facilitate. We actually build the capacity of whoever wants to run seasonal hostel, whether it's under the Samagra Shiksha, which is right now under Samagra Shiksha, there is provision for running seasonal hostels. Uh, Seasonal hostels is a place where children can stay back as the parents migrate. And even today, in many of the programs, one of the interventions which we do is to help the children either to be part of a part of a seasonal hostel or any hostel facility, whether it's KGBV, whether it's a hostel run by the tribal department,
Hmm.
or how do we support the caregiver, which individual or a family caregiver who can take care of the child. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting, because I think that also equips the child with a lot many qualities and skills that are necessary for life, not just maybe for books or for education, but
Mhm.
more skills, lifelong skills, right?
Mhm, mhm.
That go on to continue.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to again remind you, as you said, there's a Vietnam story, so we're waiting to hear it. The audience is also waiting to hear it. Let's hear it from you.
If you look at so the one of the best example for learning, if you look at foundational learning and learning as education as a whole, um, uh, the kind of strides that Vietnam has taken, they're one of the best global example, which is
Right.
and have um, which is it's completely doing amazing things in the education sector. And I was very curious, and I was going through the whole the factors which you know the Vietnam story unfolds. One of the two key components in Vietnam story is about decentralized planning and equipping parents. These are the two big components in the Vietnam story. So decentralized planning, the entire educational planning is decentralized, and the planning actually is often bottom up. So the priority comes from the community groups. That is taken up by the nearest the nearest block education officer or a parallel structure there, and then goes up for into a development planning at the state at the national level. So the need and the strategy for that community emerges from the community itself, and
Right.
that's the decentralized planning. So that is something to do with the culture. Now, the whole when I was reading the piece, one of the things which really helped me to understand is a conducive culture which prioritizes education at the community level is what drives that kind of planning. A planning which is decentralized, which is bottom up, from a need point of view. The other one is the parental education and parental support, which is again one of the big factors which has been mentioned in the document. Um, Looking at our own story, and that is one lacune which we see as at the communities, especially communities which is affected by vulnerable community which is affected by migration and displacement. The kind of support for the parents need uh, for helping the child to continue in school, whether it's the source geography or destination geography, it's what Vietnam is clearly addressing for the
Hmm.
child to continue.
Okay.
So this is something which we can learn from. There are other things which the education system as a whole, is quite progressive, and we are catching up. If you look at in the way Samagra Shiksha is rolling out things, the way the capacity is
Right.
being built, we are moving towards because in Bharat, which is the 100 years of independence, and we're looking at 2047 has been a milestone. So we are looking at it. But this is something which a great model for us to look at is Vietnam, probably, which is the closest to the country, and it's an Asian country, and we can learn a lot from that.
Right. And this also brings me to a very important observation that when you think or when you start imagining a life for such stakeholders, which include parents, which include children, which also include societal elements, other elements like the administration, policy, at all points in time, I think education is something that you have to take at priority, simply because it is the foundation stone for all these interventions, right? In that sense, I would like to know from even any, if you have any personal instances as well, or if you have anything to share with our audience on this, about anybody that you've seen doing so much better, or sharing any examples of real life impact or real life examples of doing better through education, not just through not just through familial relations, but also like personally, or even with the policies that are being made, something disruptive, or something that you noticed that, okay, maybe this is something that is the future of education.
One of the things which I saw, whether I was working in the leprosy affected community, or in a red light area, or in source villages, which is in the Indo-Nepal border, or in villages which is deep villages in the tribal belts of India. One of the things which we may saw is um, the whole discourse around positive deviance, you know. So the villages where these children, many of the villages where we say that these are backward villages or the most vulnerable villages, the
Mm,
education quotients are really low. In the same villages, there are people who have done amazingly well. We were
right.
in Nandurbag. I mean, just I think a few months back, I was in Nandurbag, and I think Dang and Nandurbag, either one of them, the places, because that was the one journey which I took. I think in Dang. Dang is one of the tribal districts in Gujarat, where AI works. We had a community meeting, and we asked, and this is one of the most backward villages, or not backward in the sense of human dignity, backward in the sense of resource backwardness, is that's the village we were sitting. And one of the questions I posed was, hey, do you know anyone from this village? And, who are the people from this village who are doing well?
Okay.
And people started, it was more of a trickle when the discussion started. But slowly we discovered there were doctors. There was sitting judge from that village.
Wow.
There were people who were working in the IT sector. There were teachers. There were people who were in the government. And it's amazing that village, which seems to be at the corner, or in the resource backyard of the country, that has produced amazing success stories in that sense. Uh, but people, many of them, were actually putting it together as and when we asked the question. So, how about using this as a positive deviance? How about using this positive role models for helping children to have a future? How about reaching out to them? So, this whole the question of positive deviance as a strategy for community is affected by adversely affected by, say, climate induced displacement or migration or any other vulnerability, is something which I saw really creating a dent. So I remember another one which, when I was in Breakthrough in one of the programs in Jharkhand. So that we were working on early marriage. How do we reduce, or we can kind of stop early marriage, is what we were working on, so that children can continue their education in school. And there's a whole story about how so many of the parents were actually helping the children to continue the education in the cities, in the nearest kasbah, in the nearest one, and nobody knew about it because they were actually were not part of the social norm. Social norm says when the girl has passed 8 or 9, we should look for a groom for her, or a boy who's 14 or 15-year-old, he need to find a work, and once he finds work, the next thing is for him to get married. So it's so that's what social norm says, right? So the whole discourse around positive deviance of parents who have done, who actually went against the norm, social norm, helping them to be visible and highlighting their stories, is actually creates a big dent.
Very, very important indeed. And I think for the audience itself, for the audience, would like to request you, what uh, what exactly is positive deviance here in this particular example? Could you take us through a definition of this possibly?
So for me, there is a social norm which is set in whichever community you're part of. In a village, say for example, one social norm is a girl need to know how to read and write, or a girl need to pass 10th. Maybe that's the social norm, and after that, जब पढ़ी लिखी हो जाएगी, then she can can get married, find a boy for her. That's one social
Right,
norm. Another
right,
social norm which is very prevalent in Delhi, a place like Delhi, is which is known for violence against women, and even especially at night. It's a girl, a lady who is on the road after say 10 o'clock. She's not from sometime a good family. That's something which is as a social. So social norms play a big part in every community. So
true.
when a positive deviance is basically, you are doing something which is against that regressive social norm, and you are creating a deviance from the social norm, and creating a result which is very positive for the community which you are serving. So that's the positive deviance from. Which is, say, for
And
example, a parent who decides to send the child, that's a girl child, to university which is far away. you know, uh,
right,
the- because often in a country like India, a girl's honor is very much associated with the family honor, right? So it's when the parent decides to send the child, when the girl to a university which is far away, it's the risk the person is taking, which is going against the social norm, which is prevalent in that community, and
right.
the daughter to do well, especially girl to do well, and make help her to be independent.
Right, absolutely. And it's also very important because this brings me to another realization here with regards to,
Yeah.
with regards to this positive deviance,
Yeah.
because this positive deviance also somehow stems from a taboo, as to speak, like maybe as a solution to that taboo, as we just talked about, that there are societal norms that we need to break, and there are, one of these societal norms is also this feeling of alienation, so to speak, or the feeling of not feeling belonged, specifically, with children who come from migrant areas, or families who come from migrant areas. And I think in that sense of alienation, it becomes difficult for them to achieve anything beyond that. Right, the first step then stays that, okay, we need to belong somewhere, we need to be a part of a culture or a community. So where do you assess that particular alienation effect, or that particular effect of not feeling belonged, as a foundation to multiple other problems?
So belongingness actually, if you look at the social ecological model, a child, when the child is born, the
Right,
child is part of a family, right? So the earliest people with the child get associated with the parents and the relatives and the people who are in the neighborhood, and then the ecosystem becomes bigger. The child start knowing the neighborhoods and people in the
right,
neighborhood. The child become part of school, then the school becomes another new ecosystem that the child is part of, and the ecosystem keep on becoming wider and bigger and bigger, and the worldview becomes bigger and bigger. But the child, when it is uprooted and taken to a community, I mean, or a place where this ecosystem doesn't exist, and that's where this the new ecosystem, and how do you build safe spaces for children to be part of a new ecosystem. So AIF looks at, whenever we work, we look at safe spaces for children to express, safe spaces to children to belong is one of the strategies which we use, whether in a community, whether it's in an urban center where the child is part of. Say, for example, we have a program in Gujarat, which is, we call it Shakar Shala, because this is a program where children from Dang, a place where a lot of migration happens, the source village, they migrate to Bardoli, which is part of Surat, district Surat, and there they work. The parents work in the sugarcane fields and factories often, and the children often, the older siblings, as you know, they take care of the younger ones, and then they are just left there at home. So Shakar Shala is a program where in the destination village where these families temporarily stay, we start temporary education programs there, as long as they are there. And that started more of a safe space for children to come together, a place where they can express. And then we started looking at foundational learning as part of the whole discourse. So
Right.
creating safe spaces, especially for girls, to be in the new ecosystem they'll be part of, is crucial for them to help them to develop, crucial for them to overcome the trauma of migration and displacement.
Absolutely, it is because I think that fulfillness or that fulfillment comes from this space conundrum itself. Because until you feel belong, because I think as you also mentioned, I am also a migrant. I come from the state of Haryana, and now I'm functioning from Delhi, like I'm working from Delhi. So this still becomes a very uh, on the surface sort of migration. We haven't left our homes altogether, or like we haven't left the place of belonging from where we were. But I think in this case, where these children do face a lot of that, do face a lot of societal stigma also, and sort of non-belongingness also, that particular network, or that safety net of schools, or that safety net of education is really important, don't you think?
Yeah, that safety net is what helped them to actually unfold as children,
Right.
young people. Because if you're constantly um, fearful and not feeling safe, that is something which I observed when we working with children in the red light districts. They're constantly fearful. They're constantly in a state of insecurity, because yeah, they don't know the next moment what may happen. So the first thing we did, we started creating safe spaces in Pune red light area, different pockets in Pune red light area, where children can come together and talk about life, help them to, and to help them to kind of normalize in their own normal. Their normal is very different from the normal which we talk about here.
Absolutely.
How do you normalize situations which they face,
Absolutely.
and also helping them to understand there is something, a world out there, a larger world view, which is, this is not the only reality. There's also a reality which is away from this. Yeah.
Right, and that reality is, I think, beyond societal norms, but that reality constitutes of so much of foundational things, like their dreams, like their ambitions. And I'm so happy to see that uh, LAMP, specifically LAMP as a program, and then American India Foundation, and your experience has all been helping these children to garner so much, to gain so much, because it is indeed very necessary that measures to strengthen literacy come from such backdrops or such contexts where they can be strengthened, right? I have been having a really great time having this conversation, because I'm just kind of soaking in everything that sort of comes from your experience, or from your expertise. But we have come to a close of this discussion. It's been about an hour, and A lot of audience have joined in. They have accessed this podcast, and I'm sure they will obviously watch it alongside. Any messages to our audiences, or any concluding words to our audiences before we close this discussion?
One of the things I'm convinced personally is about investing my children when they are very young. So, any one of you who get any chance to volunteer or invest in building up children's education when they are very young, or influence prioritizing education in a community where it's not a priority, please go and become part of that program, because
Right,
that's where the biggest dent you will be, and that's the biggest service we can do for India. And because that's where our future citizens are, that's where the vision of the country is. So, please be part of a program which is looking at building up uh, the educational outcomes for children, young children. When I'm saying young, below the age of 10 and 7, yeah, maybe.
that indeed is very important, and it has been wonderful speaking to you, Joshi. I am personally very inspired, very motivated to look around and research, and increase my research base on this. And I'm sure all our audiences also have gained a lot of insight from this. Whoever's going to watch it later afterwards, the live stream end, is also going to gain a lot of insight. I want to say a big thank you to you, and like just want to express all my gratitude from Devi Sansthan, because at Devi Sansthan as well we try to bring foundational learning and literacy closer to everybody with our accelerated learning for all, our alpha method, where we teach children about the newer ways. We teach children in a newer way to redefine literacy and to redefine learning at large, to achieve the global dream and have that social impact. And I think your words and your participation today has helped us escalate that in a much more faster way. So thank you very, very much to join in. And I'd like if you stay in the studio after we end the live stream, because we'll just end the live stream for our audiences. To everybody watching in, please subscribe to Devi Sansthan for more such videos. The QR code below that you see under my name, you can check out that QR code for the website and look at our work and see what we've been doing to make a social impact. Till then, bye bye. Thank you so much for joining in and have a great time.
Thank you.